Hey, before I kick off the podcast, I just want to shout out Next Door Clothing. Next Door, a clothing brand based out of Bondi in Sydney. They're making really nice jeans and shirts and hats. So go and check out their full range at nextdoorsydney.com. They're also artists, so you can go and check out a range of art. They put on rad parties, and I love what they're doing. So nextdoorsydney.com for the full range. All right, so this is for my father, Joe. Rest in peace. This episode is brought to you by Crush Organics CBD products, Kingpin Skate Supply, and Indosol Footwear. These companies have amazing products, but more importantly, they highlight things I value such as health and wellness, environmental sustainability, entrepreneurship, and local small business. If you visit their respective websites and use promo code THT when purchasing online, you get a nice discount and you'll be supporting the THT podcast. And in regards to Indosol, the THT code is now valid in Europe, Singapore, USA, and of course Australia. All right, let's go. Terrible happy talks. Terrible happy talks.
Yeah, good to be here, man. Whoa.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's do this. Today's guest is Cath Blakey. Cath is a Greens political party councillor, mother and advocate for social and cultural change. During Cath's political tenure, she has been responsible for the FOGO Food Waste Initiative and other cool stuff like encouraging people to ride their bikes or skateboards instead of driving their cars by building functional bike pathways in population-dense urban areas. This week, Cath is with me, Cath is with me live and on the back deck to share her journey, experiences, challenges, and hopes for the future. Councillor Cath Blakey, welcome.
Thanks, Shannon. It's great to join you here.
How's your morning going?
It's good so far. Just cycled here into town, so it's, great morning.
So you're from... Where exactly? Where'd you grow
I'm
up?
from Wollongong, born and bred, yep. Mum and dad. Mum moved here as a teacher. She grew up in Armidale and her first job was at Lake Heights as a teacher. And dad moved here when his parents worked at the university, and dad worked at the steelworks all his working life. And so I went to Mount St Thomas Public, Wollongong High School, and then studied at Wollongong Uni and went overseas for about 5 years and then came back 11 years ago now. And, it's been awesome to be on council and try and be part of bringing the change to Wollongong. Utilising the good things that we have here and trying to make the bad things less.
I can tell immediately you're passionate about Wollongong. I can tell.
Yeah.
Are you excited about its growth?
Well, I think growth's important, but growth, positive growth, not growth for development's sake, not like bulldozing for the sake of it. Sometimes we see too much, like we do have, like the economic development team at council talk about how many cranes there are in the sky is a good thing. And I don't think it necessarily is good or bad. It depends how that development is going. So we need to have appropriate development, stuff that's socially useful. We don't want just more yuppie flats. We want more, we want Wollongong to be a place where everyone can live and have a good life. And so much about public space, whether it's council parks or the beaches or the skate parks, is what makes Wollongong a great place to live. And, where Australia's, like New South Wales' third biggest city, we are used to kind of being this small regional place, but we're getting bigger and bigger. We're lucky that we've got a university, but and we have a steelworks. It's one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases in Australia, but steel can be great for making renewable energy. But we're a long-term coal mining region, so we're a region that's got a lot of change happening, and we want to make sure that change is as equitable and sustainable as possible.
It's an industrial city.
It is.
With a very large coal mining region as well. Yeah. Do you feel like being a member of a political party such as the Greens that you have your work cut out for you in this region? Well,
I joined the Greens as a student, and Wollongong's got an amazing history with the Greens. We've got the first lower house Greens MP with Michael Organ getting elected at a by-election back in 2001. So we have the Greens Party, like the local members are fantastic, and they're really diverse and have been, like, as a one rep on council, we've got 2 Greens on council. We rely on them, and like they're an amazing brains trust for me. And but you know, we know the Murdoch press often demonises the Greens. And sometimes the things that people say, whether they're community members or they're other councillors, can be absolutely ridiculous and shocking and denigrating. But I also like a bit of daggy old folk music, and I think of like Pete Seeger and some of the songs, like they said, yeah, totally, total change maker. That they're kind of like the old songs about like, well, if you ain't been called red, you ain't done nothing yet. So, you know, recognise that if you are trying to create change, sometimes you get headwinds, and you get if you're not actually trying to forge new paths, like dead fish go with the flow. So if you're trying to go upstream, sometimes
I've never heard that. Yeah, I've never heard that. Dead fish go with the flow.
Yeah, if you're trying to swim against the tide, sometimes it does create some challenges. And generally we try to be collaborative and bring people with us, and we are having success with that. Things like because we care about big picture issues like social justice and the treatment of refugees and sustainability and climate change, but how do you make that relevant on a council level? And it's things like what happens to your bin service. So like FOGO is one of the things I'm so proud of, because in Wollongong we have done a climate audit looking at the emissions, and for Wollongong Council's operations, 80% of greenhouse gas emissions come from the tip. That's mostly food scraps and other processable waste that get buried, and then that carbon rots and releases methane. And so if we can, instead of treating that like a waste product, treat it like a resource and create great compost. And that's what FOGO is doing. And it's making it easy for residents, because I used to be a staff member at council, and I was dealing with recycling and waste and going door to door knocking, sometimes if people had contaminated their recycling bins. And it was frustrating because it was all about personal behaviour rather than how can council make a service so that it's systemically just easy for people to use and do the most sustainable option. So FOGO, which stands for Food Organics, Garden Organics, has been part of making it easy for people to do the right thing for the environment.
Do you feel like you've made systemic change?
It's a process. It's on the way. And it's so interesting where the council service and also culture comes into it. So, for example, like having bike paths in the city for the first time there's been a bit of backlash about that. But this Smith Street cycleway is the first time that there's been a safe separated route from the CBD to the university, past Wollongong Public, past the Beaton Park, past the TAFE. And so we hope that more and more people are going to use it over the years. It's not perfect. I know the intersections I
reckon it works.
Aren't great.
Hey, you sort of cut across onto the main footpath.
Yeah,
I like that. It works. I do it all the time.
Well, if people are experienced cyclists, they might find it frustrating because they're used to just taking on the traffic in the road. But we know there's lots of people that don't tend to do that, particularly if you've got kids. Yeah. And we want it to be safe for kids to cycle.
It is. Yeah. It's great. And those guys who are serious, let them stay on the roads then. Do what you have to do. Yeah. Like, what's the main backlash you're getting, though, from those bike paths? Some
of the residents on Smith Street particularly, because it's been on the strategic plan for years for council, and the previous designs looked at removing parking, and so there was concern that would be a problem, particularly because that's free parking along there. So a lot of CBD workers drive there, park, and then walk the block that it is to town.
Have you lost parking spaces though?
Only a few. So but we made it one way, and by making it one way, it meant the parking could stay. So having parking in the same direction on both sides of the road has made it different for people that are leaving their driveways. So some people that have to drive across the cycleway, some of them have been objecting. Some people have been objecting that they don't like the way that the street's one way now when it used to be two ways. Some people have been objecting that they... I think they're the main things.
Do those complaints come to you?
They do, yes. And sometimes persistently the same people. It's change. And change can be a challenge. And some of them want to be able to walk around. They're concerned that council is, by funding bike infrastructure, it's taking away from footpaths. But But I think we need both. We need it to be walkable and cyclable, and any way that people can be active and get around town and do it in an emissions-free way is a good thing.
As a leader, which you are, how do you deal with those difficult conversations? What's your actually? I want to know your personal approach to dealing with difficult conversations or difficult people.
Well, I think mostly you have to listen. You have to. I've met with residents there. And taken that feedback to council staff. It's been challenging with COVID because if we didn't have COVID, maybe, I'd be door knocking the street so you can get a broad opinion of everyone rather than just the squeaky wheels or the people. Because it's true, people do tend to get in touch if they're upset about something more than if they're happy about something.
They do, don't they?
They do.
It's like that on the internet everywhere too.
Yeah.
Like reviews even. People only leave bad reviews if they've had a bad experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be great if more people left good reviews. But I got re-elected, so hopefully
Congratulations.
That's a good thing. We just had an election in December. So
amazing.
Council hasn't had its first meetings yet, but in February will be the budget time, which is kind of crunch time.
Has that re-election sort of validated your vision in any way and what you're doing?
It's been strange with COVID.
It's going to just fix your mic a little bit.
Sorry, thanks, Shannon.
You're right.
It is an exciting time having an election because often, we've got council meetings, we get 1,000-page reports, we've got to make decisions based on these reports, and it feels a bit detached from the community. But when you're on a polling booth, people are coming up to your face and telling you exactly what you think. And so it is really good. And people are more engaged in the media too. So development issues in Wollongong, there's something that I've been concerned about for some time. And in December 2020, council had a decision-making point when a staff report came to council that looked at changing the planning controls. And that was about reducing height limits of buildings. At the moment, the height limit is potentially 120 metres, but Wollongong doesn't have any buildings that high. The highest one we've got at the moment is Signature, which is 76 metres, and staff recommended bringing it down to 48 metres. So you've got more human scale. Density is good, but it needs to be human scale so you don't get wind tunnels and overshadowing and also requiring things like setbacks and good public realms, so good footpaths and public art even. But unfortunately, the majority of councillors voted to delay that. And so the good thing about the election was that I heard from more and more people that they didn't know that decision point happened, but also that they want to see things change, that they're concerned that there's overdevelopment and they want appropriate development. I'm not anti-development. I just want to see good, smart, socially appropriate development.
It's good to hear that. I love that. Are you having a lot of conversations with town planners?
We do have some conversations with town planners. In the past, Wollongong's gotten into a lot of trouble because councillors were having very close conversations with town planners. We had a terrible history of corruption. That was back in 2008. The council even got dismissed and sent to ICAC and the courts, and people were charged and ended up in jail. So that was before the Greens got on council. So how councillors' role is to look at the strategic plan, so things like the local environment plan, but that takes 10 years to revise. It's a long process to change all that planning controls. Councils don't decide development applications, but it's often when a development application is advertised that residents first realise what the planning controls are, because it's this property 120 metres high is proposed right next door to where I live. So they often do get in touch then, but council laws aren't involved in decision making about individual development applications. So things like heritage as well, we just had the Marlene Court knocked down on Harbour Street. It was a beautiful old building in an area that's got lots of heritage buildings, but council officers, council staff rejected it, but the developers took it to the Land and Environment Court, and the court overturned council's decision, and it got demolished, and it's getting a new multi-storey building there. But if council had been more proactive in our heritage controls, if we'd actually declared that a heritage significant site, then we could have been ahead of the developers and saved it. So councillors do have to make sure we fund things like heritage studies, because a lot of these planning controls, it's really bureaucratic these days. I'm from the Greens, which has had a proud protest history, and the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. That's from 1974. Back then, it was like the green bans. The rocks were being knocked down. There was people on the streets, people blockading to protect heritage buildings and protect social housing, and at the time they created this act that for the first time said you've got to take into account environment and heritage. But since then, this like massive bureaucracy has risen up that's all about writing reports and not necessarily protecting things, but documenting things. And I trained as an environmental scientist.
Yeah.
So I was frustrated that role is often about documenting, monitoring environmental impacts, not necessarily about protecting them. So I got involved in politics because I wanted to be involved in actually how do we change what's happening so that we stop the bad things happening and make sure the good things happen.
So that's what you studied at university?
I did, yeah.
What was it? Environmental science. Environmental science,
yeah.
Okay. And going back to the red tape thing, that's with the onset of just to mitigate litigation. Is that correct? Like, do you think that's what it is with the extra paperwork that I see it in public education now more than ever. Do you think it just comes back to litigation or fear of litigation?
Well, you do have to look at who still who creates the laws that the courts enforce, and in New South Wales, it's so much of the Land and Environment Court is often called the Land and Development Court. So it does favour developers and business proponents. The ability for community groups to have standing in court has been eroded. So it's sometimes courts lead change, like we've seen the EPA even sued for not taking into account climate change when it's considering approvals. And I mean, I'm not a legal expert, but I've had to learn about some legal processes when mining is really contentious in Wollongong because we've got a lot of old coal mines. They've been around for 100 years and they used to be board and pillar mines. So where you create tunnels and you leave pillars and you kind of honeycomb the rock, but you can get the coal out and still leave the structure of it.
No way.
But now we've got longwall mining, which you get, they make more money of because you get more of the coal and it's quicker. So it's like this wall that goes through and everything collapses behind. And that means the rock subsides, you get subsidence all the way from where the mine is up to the surface, and that surface is our drinking water catchment. So what we're seeing is the reduction of drinking water and the destruction of upland swamps, which are a really unique ecosystem, and also you get greater pollution wherever that water then pops out again because it's been through the mine. So that's been a really contested thing.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. Sorry, I'm full education here. I love it. Thank you.
No worries. No, it's been so there's some existing mines that have longwall approval, but Russellvale mine at the escarpment end of Bellambi Lane that has sought expansion approval, and they've had 2 longwall applications knocked back because of the subsidence impact, particularly because that's a triple seam mine. So they're actually going under it for a 3rd layer of coal. The 2 above have already gone. So if you longwall under other parts that already have board and pillar mining, you could get pillar run, which means like dominoes, all the old pillars could just collapse, and you've got, instead of having like 1 metre of subsidence, you might end up with 3, and that would just cause a lot of cracking all the way to the surface, and you'd have terrible water loss. So that got rejected twice, but that has just been approved for board and pillar. So they've gone back and revised their mine proposal and done a less aggressive sort of mine. But then at Mount Kembla, we've got South 32 have Dendrobium mine, and they put in an application for longwalling. And last year, the Independent Planning Commission had a big hearing and an assessment process. There was people that work for the mines made submissions, and scientists and Aboriginal people, and the Planning Commission rejected it. And it was a big shock. That was the first time that's happened in Wollongong, that a coal mine proposal has been rejected.
Wow.
But at the moment then, there was a lot of political hoo-ha about it. Mark Latham for One Nation declared it a crisis. And it's a really interesting issue when it comes to the steelworks, because that Dendrobium mine was first approved when BHP owned both the steelworks and the mine, but that's not the case anymore. BlueScope is a separate entity, and so sometimes it's said this coal mine is essential for the operation of the steelworks, and that's part of the history. But going forward, like, do we value water or do we value coal? And you can get coal from other places. So we know that open cut coal mines in Queensland, they're often cheaper as well. It's a cheaper source of coal than the longwall mines here in the Illawarra. But and so the steelworks, there was lots of conjecture about whether it was essential, whether it would lead to the closure of the steelworks. But the steelworks has already increased its berth capacity, so they can import more coal. They can do it faster, so they can buy whatever's cheaper, but also from other parts of Australia or other parts of the world. So, but at the moment, then the planning minister went and said, we're going to give that significant infrastructure status, which means that it sidesteps a lot of this planning assessment process. So it's a case where you've got this legal process that the department set up, and then the minister has just decided to sidestep it. So it's a really interesting issue, like who makes the laws and for what purpose, and whether the community and the environment and heritage is considered enough.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a big rant.
No, it's a wonderful rant. I'm just sitting here, I'm sort of jaws dropping a little bit because I feel really uneducated. And I guess the initial question that comes to my mind is like, and call me ignorant, why aren't these issues more predominant in the media? And why aren't like average punters like me more aware of what you're talking about? What's your theory on that? It's
been hard with COVID. Like, there haven't been the community events and the protests as much, or the public hall meetings and the street stalls because of COVID. But because we know with Stop CSG, when it came to coal seam gas, the community really mobilised. And that was a big shift for Wollongong to say it was the first time that Wollongong really recognised this is our water catchment, it's a pristine environment, we want to protect it. And we won. There became a moratorium on coal seam gas locally. Unfortunately, there's still some going ahead in the Pilliga in Western New South Wales. But at Helensburgh, where there was licences for coal seam gas drilling, they were brought back and extinguished. So that was a great community win. But it is really interesting. Why do people still not know? And it's I think activists have to really ask themselves that. Like, sometimes we operate in a bubble, and it's really important to get out in the community. And with that campaign, Stop CSG, there was a lot of door knocking. There was surveys of the community that in a way they were push polling. Like, what do you think about coal seam gas mining in our escarpment? They're like, what coal seam gas mining in our escarpment? Well, let me tell you. And then and so there were surveys done of the community that showed that the majority, like 90%, did not want it. And there was it was a very visual campaign too, with placards put all around the community and T-shirts and stuff. But yeah, that hasn't, because mining still already exists in Wollongong, it is a different kind of situation, whereas coal seam gas was new. So Gotcha. It was about stopping what was new. And with the coal seam gas campaign, there were coal miners that also expressed opposition, that they were concerned. But even today with coal mining, there are miners that express concern about it too, that see the damage and see the water that ends up coming through the mines and gets pumped out. And even it's interesting because, the newspaper readership is falling. The media is quite segmented. Some people listen to podcasts, some people listen to ABC local radio, some people listen to I-98. There's diverse players, but also there's the establishment of the Murdoch press doesn't often cover environmental issues in a in-depth or favourable way. And
okay, so this is one of my questions, and you sort of mentioned earlier that the Greens party in this local area have only been elected to council in more recent times.
Yeah.
And I sort of said this to one of my previous guests, Jess Whittaker, who ran for the Greens party. I said, do you feel like the Greens party are like the misfits of Australian politics? Do you feel like there's that image that the Greens party have, that image of being like kind of like the political misfits.
I mean, for some people, there definitely
Which
is.
I think's rad.
And
I love that.
You say that, and I think of Ian Cohen, who was one of the first Greens MPs, state parliament, you know, and he was like, when they brought American nuclear ships into Sydney Harbour, he was surfing on the front. I don't know if you've ever seen that photo. He's got a book called Green Fire.
Amazing.
It's amazing and iconic. So
front line.
Yeah, and you know. The stuff they were campaigning about at the time was like sewage outfall, and they had a giant poo on the back of a trailer, and we're taking it around beaches saying, you know, we need tertiary treatment of sewage. We don't stop dumping it, sewage outfall on our beaches. And so, the Greens have a radical history. And I think, but I think when people get on council, like we've just had these council elections across New South Wales, and we've got 68 elected. And so I think, you know, the media often vilify us for being dangerous. In fact, there's another podcast called Serious Danger where it quotes Scott Morrison saying the Greens are a serious danger. And I think...
is that Tom Ballard?
It is,
yeah,
Tom Ballard and
podcast.
Emerald Moon. Yeah.
Yep.
But because we do challenge their business model, which just assumes that business as usual, that development at any cost is a good thing, and we challenge that. We don't take money from corporations. We don't take money from mining companies. We want to actually see a ban on electoral campaigns being run on mining dollars because we know in Australia that's got a terrible history, and we've seen, we used to lead the world when it came to climate action at a federal level, and then we had Tony Abbott get in and he slashed so many of the initiatives. We got, there was a fight back, and we kept ARENA, the renewable energy funding organisation, but there was other things that were ripped up.
I mean, call me ignorant again, but do you feel like short political terms make it near impossible to implement long-term change and strategy?
It is interesting that at a federal level...
Is that too broad a question?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be a contributing factor, but I don't think elections are a bad thing. I think they're a good thing. I think it's good to have that accountability of elections. I think there's other issues like the media monopoly in Australia, like the corporate donations that are having a worse impact than the short term of elections. But it's been interesting, like at Wollongong Council, the election cycle has been all over the place because the old council was sacked for corruption. There was administrators, then the council was elected, and then they ended up serving a 6-year term. But normally council terms are only 4 because the state government decided that they were going to merge councils together, and they proposed merging Wollongong and Shellharbour. And it was only that Shellharbour put up a legal challenge to that Wollongong didn't get merged, and then there ended up being a change of premier, and so Mike Baird got booted out, and Gladys Berejiklian became the premier, and she reversed the forced mergers. So all the mergers that had already gone ahead, they still went ahead, like Inner West and Pittwater or Northern Beaches, but Wollongong and Shellharbour were saved. So that was a 6-year term. Then just now with COVID, it was meant to be a 3-year term, but it ended up being 4 years because of COVID. And then this next term that I'm just about to start is only going to be 2 years and 9 months to get back in with the election cycle because we had the delay because of council. So it'll be really interesting. Maybe I'll come back one day and we'll talk how much of a difference did that make having a short election term on council to what council could get done?
I'd love to know, yeah. I mean, and again, like I'm getting you on after an election. So like sort of to highlight a little bit that I'm not getting you on for any real agenda except just to get to know you and get educated, and that's what I feel like you're doing right now. I really believe in activism. I think activism is a good thing. I think the term activism can sometimes conjure negative sort of ideology, but I really believe we need to be nurturing people and encouraging people to be active. And so what I want to ask you is I want to use the FOGO bin scheme that you launched and initiated. I see that as someone really taking action on to make change. I want to understand the ins and the outs of making something like that actually happen to hopefully, inspire someone to take action on something else. Is that okay? Do you
Yeah,
understand
that'd
what
be
I'm saying?
great.
Do you see where I want to go with that?
Yep, always happy to talk rubbish. Recycling and FOGO compost.
So you mentioned,
Yep.
so it's food organics, garden organics, okay, and so it's effectively, I'll just give it a little bit of context. You get your food scraps in your kitchen and you're putting them in a little bin.
Yep.
So can you take us from there? Like, how did you make that happen?
So
Because I'm sure it would have been hard.
Well, I raised the issue internally. Council has planning events and looks at what strategic kind of what money it's going to put to develop strategic plans and other initiatives for implementing stuff as well. And I kept on raising FOGO. And it's partly because in the Illawarra, where Wollongong Council is the one I'm on, where we're living, but Shellharbour and Kiama already have FOGO. And they got it through their strategic plan. So they just did a waste strategy, and that identified that 40% of waste going in the red bin is food scraps. We can just change the bin service, make our green bin collection weekly instead of fortnightly, and turn that into compost. And it'll save us landfill. It'll create jobs. It'll create compost. But Wollongong, the strategy didn't have it in there. And it was partly because there was an engineering approach. There was an idea that let's sort the red bin instead. And where that happens, the compost you get is actually contaminated, because there are places where you create compost from landfill, but then you've got heavy metals and other things. So you can only use that compost on forestry projects or road verges at the time. But now there's actually a ban of using that at all. So
yeah, so just so people understand, when you bury organic matter by itself, it turns septic, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
With no oxygen there.
With no
the
oxygen.
carbon that used to be part of the carbohydrate or the food, the carbon then turns into methane, CH4, which then the carbon is methane, and then that goes into the atmosphere. It's a gas and heats our planet.
Right. So it needs to be aerobic. So it needs to have air, be aerated. So it can decompose.
It can decompose into soil, into new soil, into soil carbon.
That can be reused.
It can be reused. And you get that black, beautiful soil that you can add to, like just down at Ostermere Beach at the promenade there, that's all been top dressed with FOGO compost.
Thank you. So when we used to previously have mixed waste, so you're like your organics mixed with your everyday rubbish, all being buried. Okay, that was turning septic.
That's right.
Effectively.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do, like now, there are pipes being installed at the tip to try and capture that waste. I mean, capture that gas, capture that methane gas.
Wow.
But it's just then flared, so you turn it from methane into carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide doesn't have as much warming impact on the atmosphere, but it's still a greenhouse gas, and it's still a waste, and it's still taking up lots of landfill space. So we've got a whole bunch of old landfill sites across Wollongong, like the Russell Vale Tip, the Greenhouse Park at Coniston, and since 1984 we've had White Scully at Kembla Grange. So generally the state government isn't approving new landfill sites, and some of them, like most of Sydney, put all their waste on trains and send it to down near Goulburn to Woodlawn. But I'm a bit of a waste nerd.
I didn't know that. Thank you. Thanks for the education. Sorry, you keep going.
Yeah, so it's not likely that there'll be any new landfills approved. So, for example, Kiama doesn't have their own landfill, and when residents ratepayers or councils have to send their landfill to somewhere else, it costs a lot more money. So it makes sense to kind of optimise what we've got and not waste it. So if we can minimise what we send to landfill, it'll save ratepayers money and it'll be better for the environment.
So, so you put a proposal into Wollongong Council and said, I want to,
and at the time
mimic a program that's being done in other suburbs. Is that what effectively?
Sorry, I got sidetracked. Yeah. So going behind the scenes, I wasn't getting any success. I was getting pushback saying
by who? Other councillors?
By other councillors weren't interested, and the staff weren't interested. And then the War on Waste happened, Craig Rucastle's TV show. And
Chase's War on Everything.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. And so that looked at Penrith and how they brought in FOGO. And at the end of that segment, of that episode, he's like, contact your council if you don't have FOGO. And suddenly I was getting all these people contacted me, and I'm like, right, this is it. So we launched a petition that said, let's get FOGO for Wollongong. And that's actually partly how I met Jess. She turned up at the council meeting dressed covered in food. Yeah, it's hilarious. Covered in
she's an enigma, that woman.
She is. She's a total powerhouse. She's great. And it ended up being a bit of a crazy time, though, because I ended up in hospital and not at the council meeting because I was heavily pregnant and had preeclampsia. So Mithra, the other Greens councillor, she put the motion forward on the night. Like, I submitted it and wrote it, and but she presented it, and the motion was like step by step. It was like, let's have a trial of FOGO, because I knew there was still a pushback amongst, and I wanted to build the case.
Why?
Well, when Shellharbour brought it in, they reduced their red bin service to fortnightly. So that created some backlash because people didn't like having a reduction in their red bin service.
Is that because it just hadn't adapted yet? Because they've been so used to doing things a certain way for such a long time. So it was just more...
And when people start using FOGO, they realise how much less there is in their red bin.
The best.
And then you don't have to put it out every week. Yeah. But they didn't like being forced to do that. So... that was the time when the forced merger was underway. And so Wollongong councillors were hearing a lot more from Shellharbour residents. So I think that's where some of the concern happened. And the thing with FOGO too is that you have to make sure there's minimal contamination, because even a little bit of plastic bags, soft plastics, anything, it can have a big impact, like glass or anything. So,
or how do you monitor that?
Well, at the moment, it's an opt-in. Well, yeah, at the tip. So at Kembla Grange, Sorco run Wollongong Council's FOGO at the moment, and they have like a pick line, so everything comes through on a conveyor, and they remove contamination.
Even for the organic waste?
For the organic waste, yeah. And they remove, so it's up on a high... gantry sort of thing, and then below it is a bunch of skips. So they pull out, sometimes people put in things like, they think it's for garden material, so they put in their pots, or they put in bricks that they might bury in the yard or something. There's all sorts of things. Sometimes if people don't have enough space in their red bin, they'll end up putting it in other bins, whatever bin they have, and that creates contamination. So Wollongong has the FOGO service is opt-in. If people don't want to do it, they don't have to do it. And I'd rather they didn't do it than do a bad job at it. So it's really good that we have had less than 1% contamination. Everyone that's been getting on board have been really fantastic.
Well, here's a question for you. I assume there'd be a fairly heavy cost associated with, giving those bins to residents.
Yep.
Does the cost... I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, well, can we justify that cost in terms of how does it offset... the processing of organic materials? Is it, I know it's going to help the environment, which is great, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But is it at the detriment of our economy or our finances?
It is a bigger cost to ratepayers to have the trucks go around weekly. It would be cost neutral if Wollongong reduced our red bin collection to fortnightly, because you'd have the same kind of bin cost or expense.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But if you consider, turnover. But if you consider what would it cost to waste this landfill space and to build a new landfill, that cost about $10 million to build just a new landfill cell. To build, they've got a piggyback cell. So at the moment, I don't know if you ever stand on Mount Kembla and you look straight down, that's where the landfill is, White's Gully. And so it's on the side of a gully, and they're building piggyback liners. So it's like onion skins kind of coming out and out. So they're kind of building them down the slope. And it's a really expensive process, which is good, because in the past they used to just bury landfill and not really monitor or keep track of what was going on. Now they have liners that
on the land where they're dumping.
They have a liner, so to try and stop any leachate, any bin juice. Like, think of bin juice times 80,000 houses with all sorts of things in there. We want to stop that, because where the White Scully one is in the catchment of Lake Illawarra, a beautiful, wonderful lake. So if we didn't control the leachate, it would just end up in Lake Illawarra. So there's a lot of engineering today to landfill. And it's important that there is, because we want to prevent it becoming a big pollution source for the rest of the environment. So that if we take that cost into account of the landfill management and the cost that, like, when you bury landfill, you have to keep managing it for the next 50 years, like we see at Helensburgh, and the old tip there is at the top of the Hacking River, like right next to the Royal National Park. It's a big risk. It's really important that the full management cost is factored in.
Wow. That's so great. I love hearing it. It's good just to hear it firsthand and really understand it. Yeah, I mean, I use it. I don't really think about the bigger picture behind it, except like, oh, this is great. Well, they're gonna turn this into some compost. And I do want to know though, like, how is the compost that's been created from FOGO currently being used?
Yeah, it's a really interesting process. So at White Scully, they remove any contaminants as possible. They then put it through this really slow auger that shreds things, but it can even, if you put an aluminium can in through it, it doesn't shred it into pieces. It kind of mangles it.
Okay.
and then they put it in a shed that's monitored for moisture, and it's what's the word? Sorry. It's got low, like it doesn't let any air escape from it.
Okay.
Because then there are odor risks, even though it's oxygenated and had its moisture level managed. They try to make it a aerobic process that's not stinky or anaerobic, but it still has to be. It's still a big pile of rotting food scraps, and they mix it with other things, so it stays in there for 2 weeks, and matures, and then at the moment it's trucked down to Nowra, where Sorco have a farm, and they mature it in windrows, and then they blend it with other sands or other soil mixes and sell it back. So if you buy compost from Bunnings, you could be buying our old FOGO.
Interesting.
But it's interesting because Wollongong pays someone else to do it, whereas Armidale, it's council operated, and they actually give it back to the community for free.
Does Soilco buy it off council?
No, council has a contract and pays Soilco to take it.
They pay them to take it.
Yeah.
But then, let's say then they...
Then Soilco can sell it.
I was going to say,
it's not the best financial deal for council, but it works out better than if council had to fund the cost of landfilling it. Partly also because the state government has a tax on landfill, and that's meant to incentivise alternatives to landfill.
I guess too, though, then it's another way to look at it is that it's also creating some industry and creating jobs and putting back into the community. I'm sure the people at Soilco are happy for that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's creating opportunity maybe.
Yeah, and the Shellharbour one is run by Regrowth. There's different commercial composting makers
Soilco
as well.
should give us a bit of a kickback, so reduce our rates a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Well, and it's a really daggy thing, but like contracts of waste is a massive issue, and that'll be coming up soon. So things like,
what do you mean?
So who collects the bins, and what the household cleanup service is, whether you can put rubbish out on the curb and have someone collect it, whether all that goes to landfill or whether it gets recycled, whether the trucks are run on diesel or electric.
Is it super? I'm sure it's super competitive. Like. Private companies bidding for these,
that's right,
tenders. Yeah. Wow.
And I think we need to design the contracts so that there's accountability in them and that there's sustainability as well. Yeah. Because like the issue with household cleanup, I don't know, there was an article in the paper this week about people upset because there's just rubbish left on the footpath in Woonona. And
is that for those one-off collection days where people? What do they call that? Where you can put all your things that you usually can't throw out.
Hard rubbish or household cleanup.
Yeah, it's usually larger items.
Council pickup.
Council, and I think everyone gets them. I mean, we have them at our building once a month or something, or once every few months, I think. Yeah,
well, it used to be in Wollongong that there was twice. Oh, it was an annual thing. It was once a year you could put things out, and there used to be a calendar that was released, and there was about 30 scrappies that made their living just scavenging them.
Yeah.
But then there was concern that back then the scavenging was, we had cathode ray tube TVs, those big fat ones, the big old fat TVs, and people would smash the back of them to get the valuable metals out. And then, so that was creating a lot of unsightly mess on the footpath. So that was when the administrators were managing council, and I was actually a staff member in the waste education team. I used to work as a staff member for council. That's why I know a lot of this daggy waste stuff.
It's interesting.
But so back then they changed the contract and made it on call, so people could call up and book, and if they're in an individual dwelling they can do 2 a year, or if they're in a block of less than 8 dwellings they can book 2 each, or combine it if there's more, to so many a year. But it led to less scavenging.
Gotcha.
But also so that meant less kind of community recycling.
Gotcha.
But it also led to more formal recycling. So people have to say if they're dropping off a TV or a computer or a mattress, and those they send around a separate truck to pick up those things and they get recycled. And we're lucky in Bellambi we've got a mattress recycling company, Soft.
Because they're really
landing.
difficult. The mattresses are super difficult, aren't they?
Well, it's just they're bulky and it's not pleasant work. It's really hands on. They cut them open and pull out all the materials and the plastics and the steel, because they do often have steel frames. So it's,
and the steel springs.
Steel springs, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. Yep. Look, there's one other thing I want to ask about some of the Greens Party, I guess, policies or I guess initiatives that the party want to maybe initiate one day.
Yeah.
And I've noticed on the Greens Party social media and some other outlets that you've been advocating for a relaxation of laws around cannabis.
Yeah.
And I guess you can call it the Relax It and Tax It initiative. Right. Can you give us some background on that? Is that something that you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think same as we saw with alcohol, prohibition doesn't work. It just is a business model for criminals, and so it's the way bikies get their money. So if we actually regulated it, we treated it like a health issue. We already have a cannabis, like a marijuana clinic down in Dapto. But
medicinal marijuana,
for medicinal marijuana. But we know around the world, like where it's even for recreational use, where it's regulated, like just going to a pharmacy or a vape store, I guess. You can regulate the sale of it, and also that means people can get. There's quality control. It's not some really risky
and dosage
control, and you can also get information about health if you've got a problem with your addiction or something.
But this has always stuck out for me. I've personally made a decision to never use marijuana with THC. I use CBD products which have no THC or psychoactive ingredient in it. However, I've always just been like, well, when it's illegal, it's just going to create a black market. So by having it just reduces a black market, and then that tax it, and then that money can be used for some productive things. So I think exactly. Colorado in America and California are interesting examples. And Colorado, apparently, they're one of the richest states in America now.
Yep.
So and they're using those funds for education and health and stuff like that.
And we've seen Portugal do amazing things in that space too.
Yeah, what will they do?
Well, they've decriminalised a lot of what used to be illegal drugs, and so it has actually seen recreational use decrease, but you can get them legally now, and so you can address a lot of the health impacts, and it doesn't become a criminal issue if you've got, and it actually often reduces the price. So the production of a lot of drugs might be really cheap, just like Panadol, but if you've got a supply chain that's illegal, then it keeps the price inflated, so you free up, you have prisons, you free up the courts, and what we really need is to boost rehabilitation services. Treat it like a health issue, not a criminal one.
Well, let's face it, people that do abuse drugs are self-medicating for deeper issues. Yeah. When I see a drug addict or someone abusing a substance, I feel deep sympathy for them, because the underlying issues are probably vast, So I just think it's so much more of a progressive approach. But I guess where I feel a little bit down is I just feel like Australia is way too conservative for an initiative such as what you're proposing.
Well, it's amazing. In ACT
though,
they have it there.
But they're having issues with it, aren't they?
I'm not sure, but I know they're just about, when it comes to pill testing, they do that at events, and
like a harm minimisation approach. Yeah.
So you still have to meet with an emergency doctor, but they run through your they do a chemical analysis on whatever pill you've got, and then you can know if it's going to kill you or if and what risks there are.
Interesting. Yeah, they do that in Europe and places in Europe as well.
That's right.
Whereas in Australia, basically it's the sniffer dogs and that person's just going straight to jail.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous, these sniffer dogs. We know actually people then panic sometimes and take whatever they've got, and it can, like there's been, there can be ODs that way. And people can get past sniffer dogs anyway sometimes. Like we've seen sniffer dogs down at Stewart Park for yours and ours, and people jump the fence or throw something over or whatever. It's ridiculous, and it's really sad.
I guess for me, like, it's never changed. Like you said, like you mentioned alcohol prohibition back in the 40s. 30s. I mean, and people will just continue to smoke marijuana. I think with marijuana, it's interesting though, because now the medicinal benefits are proven.
Yeah.
Obviously, like anything, it can be abused. Like you can abuse Panadol for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, like then you can put that money can be put into education, because I'm a PDHPE teacher and we do drug and alcohol education in our health programs.
Yeah.
You know, and we talk about a harm minimisation approach and how we can encourage young people to take that approach in regards to peer group pressure and things like that, and supporting friends at parties and things like that.
Yeah.
But then our government laws are completely opposite to what we're trying to educate young people, and that is to take personal responsibility.
If someone's like has had a bad health reaction, if they're worried about getting help because they might end up in jail or something, that's ridiculous. They just need to be able to get the help they need and stay safe.
Exactly.
But a lot of people also use and don't have any adverse impacts. So doing it sensibly and knowing what you're in for is really important. Like, I think it's really archaic. It's like
archaic. I love that word.
They used to be treated that like with sex, where women were not told anything about it, and just it was assumed that sex didn't happen. And of course, people were getting into all sorts of crazy situations and need coat hanger abortions and stuff. So it's this really ridiculous, outdated, non-evidence-based approach. It's just the law and order kind of drum that gets beaten by conservative politicians is pathetic, I think.
So when you're at a councillor meeting, the meeting is made up of is it constituents from? Is that the word for from Liberal Party, from the Liberal Party, from the Labor Party, Independents and Greens Party? Is that right?
So on Wollongong, drug and alcohol is not a council issue. Unfortunately, it's one that I think needs to change. That's more of a state issue. But back to Wollongong Council. So there's a team of councillors. So Wollongong has 13 councillors. There's three wards. So each ward has 4 councillors, and there's at Wollongong at the moment, there's 6 Labor councillors, 3 Liberals, 2 Greens and 2 Independents. So to get something passed, you need 7 people to agree with you. And sometimes you can, if something's coming up that you don't agree with, you can either try to just vote against it or you can try to amend it. So that's often a judgment call we have to try and make. Or like some things, sometimes council passes motions that are about lobbying or about kind of position statements, and sometimes they're about actually doing things. And of course, the things that make a difference in people's lives is what council actually does. But something like the Rainbow Crossing was, so in front of the Novotel Hotel, there's a rainbow crossing.
Oh, thank you.
And even though that's more of a symbolic thing, but it's really important to the community, particularly because that was a motion that came up at the time when there was a plebiscite in Australia about marriage equality. And that was a bit of a divisive one. The Greens backed it. It was a proposal from a Labor councillor, and the Labor team split on it too, and the Liberal team split. So it didn't go along party lines, but the majority of councillors supported having a rainbow crossing to celebrate inclusivity and the LGBTQI plus in our community. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
I mean, for me, I think a rainbow crossing is just a no-brainer. Like, and I go, oh, that's an easy decision. Just do it. Do it.
Yeah.
But these little things, it's not a little thing. I think it's a very symbolic. But
sometimes they get divisive.
Why do these things become so hard? And I guess my question is, do these meetings become like, I guess, a game of Survivor where you have to form allies with other political parties?
So far at Wollongong, because there's no one group, like my experience has been, because there's no one group that has a majority, there is quite a collegiate approach, and we do try to collaborate with people and find common ground. It means picking your battles. Okay. But like when it came to declaring a climate emergency, it also helped that there was a massive community out, pushing for it to happen. So it's that time when then activism really impacted what council did. Another issue was when the state government decided it was going to remove funding to the free shuttle bus in town, the Gong Shuttle. And there was a massive community outcry about that. And council came to the party and found $300,000 a year from strategic reserves, which could be used for anything like skate parks or anything, and said we will keep the green bus running free because it's a really important thing in our community. And it's an economic no-brainer because it moves 3 million people a year between the uni and the hospital and the CBD and Fremantle. So it's really key service.
Absolutely.
But so with that, there was no politics. Everybody agreed. And it was really interesting because the Liberal councillors called for it to happen, even though it was a Liberal state government that was making the decision. Sometimes council laws are united. Sometimes it's divergent. Council made a position on the Russellville coal mine. It had never made a position on mining before. Staff had written reports that focused on the science or sometimes the economics or all the different aspects that council staff have responsibility for. But it was the first time council made a political stance on it, and council objected to it.
Right.
And that was because there was a big community campaign about Russellville, and because it's a mine that's the operators have had a long history of pollution and polluting waterways and not doing its basic maintenance.
For those that don't know, again, coming in at a very base level here and being, my political engagement is limited. I do what I have to do. I vote as I'm required to, and loosely and as a ratepayer as well, loosely stay in touch with what's going on in the area. But I just feel like I feel very oblivious to how the workings of those things that occur in the council chambers happen. So can you give us all a breakdown in terms of how often do you meet?
Yep.
What are those meetings like?
Yep.
How do you actually bring something to the meeting if you
Yep.
want change? And how everyday person such as myself could get you to take something to council or take something to a meeting or initiate a change.
Yeah, and it's challenging because there's no one way.
Like a change, for example, building a skate park in Wollongong.
Well, that change is in the works because it's already got budget. So
I've got an agenda. I don't care. I've got a massive agenda. Build a skate park in Wollongong, please.
Yeah, and it needs to happen, and it's lucky that it's already got budget because it's been identified to happen. So it just needs to finally happen to be decided where it's going to be.
Really?
Yeah, because there's been calls for skate parks for a long time, particularly in Thirroul and in Port Kembla.
Yeah.
So the way things can happen at council, there's various ways. Sometimes people present petitions that gets noticed by council laws. Sometimes, but generally to get a motion in, you have to have a councillor present a motion.
Right.
So it could be that Councillor Blakey requires the councillor might just ask for a briefing or a report on the progress with the skate park. And just to make, and that forces the staff to do something, to report back, to let us know how the progress is coming.
So is the mayor heading the meeting?
The mayor's the chair. Yeah,
Is
so
the chair of the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So he's running through the motions.
He is. So you start with and community can apply to speak at a council meeting. So the meeting starts with a prayer, and then it has a time when people declare any political.
A Christian prayer?
A Christian prayer, yeah.
Okay.
Some other councillors have an affirmation that's just like, we promise to do the best by our citizens, aka not be dodgy.
Yeah.
And then there's...
Not be dodgy. So nice to hear a councillor say that.
Well, I mean, the history of council is pretty shocking.
I know.
And all this governance stuff is really important.
Well, power corrupts, let's face it.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway.
But yeah, so, and then people can speak at the council, they can... and if they've applied to beforehand, and then you look at the reports from staff. So often there's reports like there might be a tender, who's going to run the kiosk at the Unanderra pool or all these things. And generally they're adopted en bloc. They're not contentious. They're just the goings of council. Sometimes they are contentious, a tender about who's going to clear the sand dunes at Port Kembla. I didn't support that, so I didn't adopt it en bloc. We spoke to that and we lost, unfortunately, and the dunes got bulldozed for ridiculous reasons. But anyway, back to the process. And then at the end of the meeting, council goes through motions that come from councillors, or the Lord Mayor mayoral minutes trump them and go first. And it's really interesting because notions of motion from councillors they can be lobbying things, like, so that council writes to the state government to say, we want the intersection at the top of Bald Hill fixed because it's too risky. That's been one that's come up quite a bit. Or different issues. Or they could be about council staff report back on something, because to get council to do anything is actually quite an iterative process. Often you need to develop a strategy and you get the strategy funded, and then that strategy comes up with a plan of what to implement, and then you have to get each of those initiatives funded. So the sports strategy the play strategy is already identified that Wollongong, that skateboarding is the thing that our community loves to do. And so it's identified that then one of the actions should be that we build a CBD skate park. And it's in the budget.
And that's agreed upon by all councillors.
Yeah, and then in every February, council laws meet to have a budget meeting for the year ahead. Gotcha. And then in May, that budget goes on public exhibition. And then, is adopted at a council meeting. May this year.
Yep.
And then it goes on public exhibition, and it's ridiculously detailed. Gotcha. It has like hundreds of pages that are like footpath, Collins Street, footpath, like
wow.
Colbert, Ferry Avenue.
Wow.
And then people provide feedback on that. Stuff like the North Beach Surf Club roof, that was one that generated a lot of feedback because it was meant to just be in a few years' time, and the surf club community were like, no, it needs to happen now. And then council staff kind of prepare a report about what all the feedback is, and then the council then adopt it. Sometimes councillors changing on the floor, but it's easier if the staff have already made the changes, or if people kind of, have already provided that feedback, and then it's adopted and then it's rolled out. So it is hard once the year is already operating to create new initiatives. And when I did that, when I put the motion up about FOGO, it ended up that there's a trial, and so they found money to run the trial, but then there was like delays, like, oh no, we're going to wait for this state government grant, and then they ended up being able to encompass it in the next kind of budget cycle, the next budgeted year. So it can take some years to get things changed through council. But then with the green bus, $300,000 was found from reserves. So some things are slow, but if there's enough community pressure, things can be sped up and be quick.
So community pressure can make things happen.
It does, yeah. Okay. Community scrutiny.
Well, how would you advise local skateboarders then right now?
Write to council laws, and if someone wants to speak at a council meeting, they're good things to do, and then make sure follow the budget. I mean, it can be really easy as just writing to council and say, I've heard this is happening. When is it happening? It needs to happen now. I want to see it happen. My kids are growing older. I'm growing older. I want to be able to skate in my town.
My knees aren't going to be able to handle it in a few years. Yeah, that's so cool. So yeah, like they said, the budget's the money's going to be demonstrated in May, and then.
Exhibited.
And then what the location is going to be, how's the location decided?
Well, so, that'd be...
What's the process for that?
Often that gets exhibited as well. So when it came to the Bulli, there's a new pump track for bike riding, like a dirt track. That was 3 options were exhibited, and people provided feedback on that. So, I don't know yet how staff are planning to pursue that.
How do they provide feedback? Like, is there a survey?
It's on a website.
So go to a website.
our.wollongong.nsw.gov.au has all the things that are on exhibition at the moment that people can have feedback on.
But ultimately, who makes the decision around location? So, like, the general public can give feedback on, like, I think it should be here, here, or here.
Yep.
But who makes the ultimate decision? Is it the councillors and the mayor?
Well, it's often the staff report. It has a recommendation, and if councillors agree, it'll be adopted. If councillors disagree, they might change it. So it can happen. It is a really good question. Who makes that decision?
Yeah. I mean, because it's like, I'm sure, like I guess I think about politicians. I can't imagine how challenging it would be, and I just think like it must be so hard to like keep everyone happy.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I want to sort of go into your psyche a little bit as a counsellor, like, what's your personal approach to that? What guides you in those decisions when you know that not everyone's going to like your idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as a green, I come back to principles.
Principles. So what keeps you resilient, I guess, is the question. Yeah.
And for me, like being in nature, like having that touchstone is really important. It's where I get rejuvenated from. And so we look at the principles with the greens. We've got 4 that are ecological sustainability and social justice, grassroots democracy, and non-violence. So I kind of just look at them through that lens. And you can interpret things different ways. Occasionally, Mithra and I, who's the other current Greens councillor, differ on stuff. But generally things like a footpath, to me it's a matter of social justice, that people should be able to walk around their suburb. And it's, it improves sustainability because it means people can get around without having to get in their cars. So, yeah, that's where I go. If when I put that motion up to council that we would eject to the Ross of our mine, there was some people that were upset about that because they work there. But I recognise that if we want sustainability into the future, we need a long-term plan. We need to get away from the stuff that is destroying the planet and create industries and support industries that are not destroying the planet, that are sustainable. Yeah.
So would you say you let principles and values guide you?
Yeah, I try to. Yeah.
Try to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's because it's an incredibly privileged position, being a councillor, being any politician. But it's and you do have to make decisions about when are you going to make waves, when are you going to go against the flow of what the others are saying. But yeah, like I said, dead fish go with the flow. Sometimes you have to have courage and do what you think is right and have conviction about. And sometimes people lobby on stuff as well. So you take that into account as well. You take into account the staff recommendations and make a judgment call. And I'm lucky that we've also got a local group where we discuss things and, yeah.
Does it get stressful sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
How do you manage stress personally?
I think
you go to nature?
Go into nature, yeah, just like being outdoors, time with my family. I've got a toddler that makes being with her makes me very present because
busy.
she won't let me like always be distracted on my phone or anything.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Total blessing and delightful, but challenging too. And but also just sharing, like talking to the people in the community about things, because so it's not just my thoughts, it's you try and be informed about what the community think.
Yeah,
but not take the commentary on the Illawarra Mercury's Facebook page to heart. Like sometimes there's a lot of
But this
naysayers.
Is just keyboard warriors.
Yeah, it can be.
This is the world we live in right now. Oh, isn't that rain nice? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're outside on the back deck and there's a bit of rain on the roof.
Yeah.
There's this whole, we live in a generation of keyboard warriors. I'd love to see some of these people say those things in an actual person-to-person public forum, and they never would, and I guess that's where I think these days resilience in cyber resilience is more important than ever. I have these conversations with teenagers in high school all the time. Like they're always having issues with commentary on social media,
Yeah.
But then I was just listening to you say that you'd have to deal with that, on a public level.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that'd be hard to handle sometimes.
Sometimes, but then
you seem pretty mellow about it.
Yeah, it's it was really interesting. The position on mining has been one of the most contentious, particularly because Wollongong's strong history of mining.
I get it,
and but it's so important to the sustainability and to many of the constituency of the Greens as well that it was actually some of the time when I felt like it was the most stressful and also the most energising because it was really important. So
I guess it comes down to how do you change culture? Again, and I think we talked about this on the phone yesterday, like about the bike paths. Look, let's face it, the bike paths always, and it could be a little bit better. Everything can be better.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're symbolic of a city that is saying, hey, leave your car at home today.
Yep.
And ride your bike or skateboard or walk. You
Yep.
know, it's not.
But I worry that some people feel like they're being judged to do that, and I
What do you
think
mean
also,
judged?
like actually, if someone else rides, that's someone you don't have to compete with for a park. So it can help everybody. If you are a driver or not, having other people ride is a really good thing.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, because car parking is often a thing that's discussed in the CBD. But actually, compared to Sydney, car parking in Wollongong is easy.
It's a breeze.
But
We don't have to pay. Or we do, but not
like $1 an hour.
But not as nowhere near as much.
No, that's right.
And not as in. And there's a lot more free parking on the roads. Parking for free.
Yeah, if people want free parking, they might have to walk a block or two. But that's a change in psyche. That's a change in culture, and it's really interesting because that, like, what does that mean in terms of urban planning? So since the Fig Tree Grove was the first shopping centre kind of actually in New South Wales,
Right.
and so that was a big change
Was
in
it?
urban planning. Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so it no, I didn't know that either until I was talking to one of the transport engineers, because my mum actually got hit on the avenue trying to cross from Fig Tree Grove to the doctor's surgery. And Jess actually was the ambo that picked her up.
No.
It was crazy.
Is that why they put that new barricading fence? Or has that always been there?
No. Oh, my mum got hit on the avenue, not on the Princess Highway. So it was on the other side. I'm not sure.
I thought they put
She just got hit at the lights. It was just someone in their van at the lights, just didn't see her. It was an accident.
Yeah.
Accidents happen.
Yeah.
But so that's why I was talking to this transport engineer all about, like, why did this happen? How can we address it? But that has made a massive shift in how people shop, having suburban shopping centres where they get in their car and drive to them, compared to something like markets in the mall where there's not parking right at the door. They might have to walk, and it's like they're dealing with more small producers and getting stuff direct from a farmer. Or there's really interesting things about culture, whether you go to the supermarket and get a lot of heavily packaged food, or go to the fruit grocer and get and veg and get unprocessed stuff that's healthier. And it's the role of culture and urban planning and council decisions are really interesting.
They are.
Yeah.
And I just think, how do you change culture? I just think it takes a lot of time, even for the smallest things.
Yep.
You know? But it's like,
it can happen really quick. Like if you look at the 60s, if there's social movements.
Or if there's something that happens.
Yeah.
So let's, for example.
Like a pandemic.
It's like all of a sudden, the cultural shift that you do 1,000 Zoom calls a week now.
Yeah.
And you're working from home. Like that cultural shift happened just through sheer necessity, right?
Totally, yeah.
But I mean, why can't we make change happen without having something as dramatic as a pandemic?
Yeah. Hopefully we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think too, like, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yeah, that's right.
So I love that.
And getting engaged with it is the only way. Like if you sit back and you just go, nothing changes, I don't know, but there's all stuffed or more like colourful languages, then nothing will change. But if you get involved, at least you're trying, and then you've got a good red hot go.
Yeah, it is. Just one of my last questions I've got for you is, like, what I feel like a lot of young people are disillusioned with politics.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
I can't blame them to a degree.
Yeah.
Like, why should young people become more engaged in politics, in whether it's local, federal? Why do you think they should? How do we get them to care?
Well, their vested interests are deciding things for them. If they want to be involved, they can help shape what decisions are made and what the future looks like. So whether it's that they can't afford to find anywhere to live because housing affordability is crazy, that's a decision by governments that have set up a tax system that favours investors over people, and that has failed to build social housing, that's failed to build housing for people in need. It's a decision of politics that decides how much TAFE or uni fees are. It's a decision of politics about whether there's a free bus or how often the bus comes or how often the train comes. There's lots of things that they can push back and try and shape. And politicians are used to not actually being contacted. And so if there's someone that has some spark, that has identified something they want to see change, get in touch, and sometimes you find a Green that will help champion it for you, or you can push them back and get your councillors or state MPs or federal politician, you can create change. And this year in 2022 is really key for Australia because we've got a federal election, and the current Liberal Conservative government only holds a balance of power by one vote, only one seat. So if we had even just a small change, it's about 800 votes in a key area, we could see a change of government. We could see this government fall. And if whoever forms the new government, like the Greens are pushing for dental into Medicare, for unlimited healthcare, for mental health support instead of this 10 a year, pushing for action on climate change, just things that will make people's lives better, and 1 million homes so that we have better investment. Like it's ridiculous that this pandemic that we haven't gone. There's a housing crisis. Let's stimulate the economy by building public housing. It's ridiculous that hasn't happened. Other countries around the world have decided to build back better and address these social and climate challenges with their pandemic response. And it's just disgusting that Australia hasn't done it. So this year is a key one to change things up. And we are really hopeful in the Greens that we could get a second Green senator for the upper house. And the Senate, like Australia has this 2 houses of Parliament in the federal parliament. So the government is decided by the lower house, and then the upper house is a house of review, and the Senate can block things, and they can make the government's life really hard, and then they can get great initiatives up as well. So there's scope for the Greens to win more senators, and we could get a second Green for New South Wales, and that could really shake things up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cath. No, it's great.
Hey, Shannon.
So what's next for you? Where do you see yourself, like professionally, your career in? Like, do you have a career strategy or a direction that you want to go, or are you happy?
I don't. That's how I became a city councillor. I didn't. It wasn't part of the plan. I was a staff member. I was an environment officer at council, and I quit my job there to work at a food co-op because that was my love.
Which one?
Love thing.
The one in
Flame
Thurl?
Tree. Yeah.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And so I was not a public servant anymore. So for the first time, I could speak publicly about what I thought about the world, and the Greens needed a candidate, and I became a federal candidate, knowing that locally I didn't have much chance of winning. But I wanted to really see the back then it was Lee Rhiannon get elected to the Senate. She was our Green senator that was going for election. And that, through that process, I learned a lot about media and a bit about politics, and met so many great people in the community. And then when council elections came up, the person that had been the Greens councillor, he wanted to go and he got offered a promotion at uni. He's a climate physicist. And so he stepped back from council, and I got pre-selected to be the lead candidate and got elected. So
Amazing.
I don't know. At the moment, I've got a 3-year-old. So in 2 years' time, she'll be at school, and then we'll be heading up for another council election. So I don't know. It's interesting where we've got city councillors elected, like in the inner west. There's a lot of Greens councillors. You've got a Green state MP, but I don't know if politics is what I'll be pursuing. But at the moment, it's really great that what we can do on council in partnership with the community that's pushing for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You seem inspired. You seem really inspired.
Oh, it's great talking politics with you.
Yeah.
It's really, It's
Well,
much
even
better
though-
than just like reading business papers and dealing with the council bureaucracy at home with me and my laptop.
Yeah. That's how COVID's affected your job as well, right?
Yeah, a lot of meetings on Zoom and
Is that how they're having the main meetings? Or they're still in person?
we had a couple in person last year, but most of them have been on Teams. And before that, it was on Skype for business, which was so archaic.
Yeah, Skype, so old school.
Yeah.
That's so 5 years ago, right?
Yep.
Well, listen, Cath, it's been epic, and I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you. Good on you for asking questions too. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're very good questions, but they're just questions that I feel. Again, I'll openly admit I'm not as politically engaged as I'd like to be. It is important. And I think it's one of those things, as I get older, I'm actually valuing it more than I ever have, because I start to understand that we can make change. I don't know how you feel sometimes, but I think a lot of people are just starting to, they bury their head in the sand and go, it's just too big a problem. It also builds a little bit of angst. And I don't want to feel like angst. I'm turning the news off. I don't want to know a thing,
And I think sometimes activists have focused too much on individual responsibility, like whether I get a straw or not with my drink, and it's been great to see the plastics-free movement like doing amazing things, but we also need systemic change, and that's where politics comes in.
Systemic change. It's the hardest thing.
Yeah, it is. But
you got to do it. People such as yourself are doing it. I love it. Listen, I ask all guests to come to the podcast with like a cause they want to support or advocate for. It can be a charity or a social enterprise or just a philosophy or an idea.
Yeah.
Have you got something for us today?
Well, I've got a whole list, but anyway, I feel like I've covered a few. But if anyone's in Wollongong, if they're using the bike paths, Council's got a user survey at the moment. So jump on to council's our.wollongong.nsw.gov.au website and provide your feedback about the pop-up bike paths, whether you like them, whether you don't, what's good, what's bad, the intersections, or there's different approaches because some are separated cycleways, some are shared paths, some are just on-road with traffic calming with cars reduced speed limit to 30 k's an hour. They're different approaches and people like some and not others. So let council know what you think.
Awesome.
And if someone's somewhere else in the world, food is a really interesting thing at the moment. At the moment, there's like lots of photos in social media about supermarkets running out of stock. So I would say support your local grower or your independent grocer. In Australia, we've got a duopoly of Coles and Woolies, and through cultural change, we can also challenge that and support local independent retailers and growers.
Yeah, local growers and buying seasonal, locally grown food. It's generally more nutrient dense, better for your immune system, better for your health, which is paramount in these times we live in.
Yeah, it keeps the jobs local, it's fresher, and there's short supply chains and transparent ones. No one's getting exploited or relying on exploited labour. Community
development.
Yeah.
I'll put it. Well, there's a link to that survey in this episode's show notes. So if you scroll down on this episode, you'll find a link to that and click on it and, go and give us your ideas and opinions. You can find this episode on terriblehappytalks.com and also all the other major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and whatever platform you prefer to listen on. It always helps if you subscribe and leave a review. Just helps to, get the podcast more visible on the interweb, on the internet, because, that's what it's all about these days. But also, Cath, I have a gift for you. But it's upstairs. I won't go and get it. I'll give it to you after the show. But you get a THT T-shirt.
I'll have to declare it if it's less than $50 worth. Anyway,
yeah, they're less than $50.
Cool, sweet.
Yeah, they retail at Kingpin for $40.
Cool.
Is that okay? Oh, because otherwise it's a bribe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Don't accept it.
No, I'll leave it with you. I'll have to buy one.
Yeah, buy one.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so clueless. I didn't even think.
No,
of that.
It's all good.
Sorry. Anyway, so can I give you a sticker?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah, I'll chuck it on my bike. Yeah.
Great. But look, thanks for being on. I guess, like you said, I think it's so powerful just to get an understanding of your local government. So whether at the moment we're in Australia on the southeast coast, just south of Sydney, in a region called Illawarra, a town called Wollongong. It's a coastal town, but wherever you are in the world, get to know your local councillors. I mean, it's always helpful. I think, power to the people, really, So
they can make magic happen.
You can make magic happen, Cath.
Together. Yeah. I don't have any power without.
You don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Without the community pushing for it.
Sorry, I'm fading away.
All good.